Hi everyone and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Shir, who's from Tel Aviv in Israel. Now, Shir is a very interesting self-taught software developer whose passion has become business. Now, isn't that the most awesome place to play, where passion and business and your life intersect and play out to be the place where you create and share with the world? So now Shir started a range of companies, but the recent one he's just launched, which has raised over 12 million from one of the top capital firms in the world, is with a company called accessiBe. Now, accessiBe is a site that helps people with disabilities to access the web. And according to CDC, about 25% of people have issues that actually stop them enjoying the web with all the information that it provides. So we've had this on our site for quite a few weeks now, and it's such a pleasure to have you on the show and hear about what inspired you to be a software developer, to start businesses, and to play in this great big world and share your skills and passions with the world. So welcome to the show, Shir.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me. Absolutely. Great to be here.
So let's go a little bit back to when Shir was a young boy. What were you passionate about? What are the things you love to do?
Well, I mean, right from childhood, I built my own computers and took them apart and then rebuilt them, playing with hardware and then getting into software. I really loved gaming, different games. There was, I think, when I was young, Counter-Strike, Unreal Tournament, there were some games. I liked always to go and change how things work under the hood, provide some mods for different games. So yeah, throughout my childhood, I basically really loved to do something very similar to what I'm doing today. And yeah, so that's, and I think that, when you start something that you really, really love, right from childhood, and it grows with you and you become better at that. And then you can also produce things that people actually use throughout skills that you've acquired, in your general life, right? In gaming, stuff like that. It's really amazing. Really cool.
So you got obviously enjoyed gaming, as you mentioned. So, but a lot of people do gaming and they just lock the door, close the blinds, and disappear into a cave. Eat chips, ice cream, Coca-Cola, and but you obviously didn't do that. You went, okay, I love gaming, I love computers, I pull them apart, I put them back together. So what was your first entrepreneurial experience? What inspired you to start your first business? And what was it?
Yeah, so my first business was an agency, web development agency, software agency. Basically, I wanted to go and, so I've been in software throughout, I think, most of my life. And I wanted to try design. I wanted to become the developer that can also design. So I took some courses and started, designing my own websites and things like that. And found out that I'm pretty good in designing stuff. So I created an agency so back then I thought maybe I should even focus on design, right? So I created an agency to start designing things for clients. Turned out that I couldn't leave the software world behind me, so I just designed my own things and then built them. And then most of my entrepreneurial experience was, and it's really amazing. I mean, you design your own software, you design your own interface, UI, UX experience. You build the entire thing. You figure out how you want people to use it. You figure out the best features, how to make it better than other things. even for clients, not even for just myself. Most of my days I provided, you know, services for clients in the agency, and then to also build that, so you get, you know, the entire route from designing the thing and then making it actually work and have real people using it. So that's really cool.
So you really were the entire journey. It was design, build code, and attract an audience.
Something like that, correct?
Yeah, because and you didn't never went to university to do coding. You just learnt it because you're just so passionate about it and just learnt by doing. Is that correct?
Yes. I think that most, I mean, most of the things that you learn in university uh, is is theory, and I mean, if you put a lot of time, and it's not like it's easy, right? I mean, I work 20 hours a day for the past 10 years, literally. So I think that if you are willing to put a lot of time into practice while also, you know, learning the theory online, which you have so many places to do that,
Hmm.
then you're on the right path. At least for me, that's how I you know, have done or achieved what I've achieved.
So how old were you when you started your first business?
22, right after army in Israel. 22, released from the army, and a few months later, started my first software agency.
So how long? How long? Now it's compulsory to do the army, isn't it, in Israel?
Yes, correct.
That's right. So how long do you have to do that gig?
What, the army?
Yeah. How long was it? 2 years?
Uh, no, 3 years. I think
Three
that
years.
today it's a little less than that. I think that today it's like 2.5 years or 2.7 years, something like that. My time was 3 years
So you went pretty well straight from high school to the army,
to the army.
and then you got out and said, "I want to start a business designing websites, user interface, UX." Is that right? Or
Yeah. Look, in the last year in the army, the last year, I've just everything that I've done. I had a notebook, and I listed all the things that I want to do, all the applications that I want to build, all the website that I want to build, all the software that I want to learn, everything. I started building my startups in the army mentally, right, in the last year. So when I got out, eventually, I just exploded. I just wanted to do things. Um, so it really started before. I mean, you know, in my head.
so you felt this real call to go and do this.
Yeah.
Like you were so passionate. It was like writing notes every day. You're in the army, but when you came out, you're like a almost like and I don't know if you've heard of the Blues Brothers movie. Have you heard of the Blues Brothers?
No, actually.
Okay. So the Blues Brothers sort of went out and tried to help save some nuns from losing their convent, I think it was. So, and they were on a mission from God. So almost like you're on a mission, wasn't it? I can just sort of detect this energy that's going, I've just got to do this. It doesn't matter how I do it. When I get out of the army, and you're taking notes, and you are on a mission. Is that how it felt?
Uh, yeah. I mean, it, I really love what I'm doing, right? As I've said before, designing things and then making them a reality, making them an
Hmm.
actual product that people use. Those things, when I see that, I mean, that's the driver. That what drives me. That what I wake up in the morning for. Building things and making people use them, getting feedback from people, seeing people use my things. I don't know why it's like that or how it got to be like that. And in the army, when I, you know, was thinking about the next thing that I'm gonna build when I'm released and stuff, it wasn't that you know drove me because I have yet to build something that is very major so other people use.
Hmm.
it was just the creation, but then after that, people use what you build, it's really amazing. It's really cool, and I really love the feeling. And it's like there were so many things that I knew that I could bring to the table that are different than what, you know, the web environment had to offer back then for clients, for myself, for, you know, different companies, different products, different ideas that I've had. I had so many ideas for different companies, products, you know, some came into fruition, some it turned out really bad, you know. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's not like somebody sent me on a mission, right? It's just
No,
internally.
no, it certainly sounds like it came from within. What I love about what you're telling me and sharing is that there's two parts to this. Well, there's three parts to the equation as I understand it, and I totally get it because it's been the same for me. In that, you are passionate about something, then you create it, or create content around it, or create code, design. It really doesn't matter what you create. It could be a photograph, it could be a movie, it could be a user interface, a website. So, number one, you have this passionate purpose and calling that no one's calling you to. It sort of just rises out of who you are and what you're meant to be. Number two, you then create something around that. And then I think the other powerful part of these three steps is that then you share it with the world, and then you are validated. So you're saying, so what you've just told me is that it's not just the creation that's important, it's that people use it as well.
Have to use it.
Yep.
Have to have people that use it.
Yep. Exactly. So you are creating products that people use. Some people create content that people read and view. Whether it's a movie producer, a blogger, a podcast, it really doesn't matter. But I think you've just shared the secret of what drives a lot of us. And it's innately part of what we are as human beings. Number one, a passionate purpose that you discover. And some people never discover it. They go through life, just go through life dreaming, but don't do anything, don't create anything. I even don't know why they're on the planet. And the other part then is that creation. And then it's this incredibly powerful validation when people use what you've created. And I think that's where it gets really, really exciting. And I think, and the thing I talk about regularly is that when you share your creation with the world, you change the world, and the world then changes you.
I mean, that's exactly what happened with accessiBe, by the way. I mean,
Yep.
it started off, you know, as so I had my software agency, and we had clients that Israel was one of the first countries to legislate a specific regulation for
Yep.
accessibility. Back in 2016, our clients asked us to start exploring solutions for that upcoming regulation for them. So that's when we got into that world, you know. So like, long story short, after the development of the product and making it go live, and seeing people using, people with disabilities, you know, people that couldn't use the internet before at all, like blind people who now can buy online in an e-commerce website, or read somebody's blog, or, you know, hire a service. When you see that, that's even bigger, much bigger than, you know, just building a cool interface of some to-do list or whatever, you know, a website, an e-commerce platform that people buy from. That's much larger than that. I didn't start accessiBe because I wanted to change the world, to build something, you know, that has a major effect. I wanted to solve accessibility for my ecosystem, for my clients. There was a regulation, and I wanted to solve that for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
especially small businesses who couldn't pay $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 for accessibility compliance. Just wanted to solve it for them. But the more I got into it, the more people with disabilities I worked with and still am working with, from blind people to people with epilepsy and motor impaired people, the bigger the effect, as you said, the world had on me.
Mm-hmm.
And the world has changed me.
Yep.
And it's really, intertwined, because I love creating and I love building and I love
Mm-hmm.
seeing people using what I build. And then you get people who couldn't do whatever that is before at all, or almost at all. Now they can, because they use something that you have created from scratch. It's like your baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes everything. It changes everything, because it's much more powerful than a standard application or a standard website. And then you're changed. And then you take that to the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And then you build a big company that all that it's doing is this. I mean, that's how it ended up with me. So I really relate to what you've said. You do something, you change the world, but the world, the feedback, the ground, it changes you back.
Absolutely. What attracted me to the internet, and especially social media back in 2008, 2009, was that it was a two-way conversation. The analog world was always a one-way conversation. You created a printed book, you put it out there, and you didn't know what was going on apart from you sold books or people saw a movie. Today we have two-way conversation, and that's what you're experiencing. And I really think that's where the magic happens, is where you share creation with the world speaks back to you, and the world changes you and takes you to a whole new level, because you're saying what you're doing is working. And it happens not in lag, it happens in real time.
Yeah.
And
do you know how that feels when, when we get an email from a blind person who for the first time managed to buy something that he really, really wanted to buy for a long time? We get that almost daily.
Yep.
We have clients, we have partners that are disabled from the neck down. They can't move, an inch in their body, but they are really successful people. They have their own agencies, their own companies, their own businesses, and they partnered up with accessiBe because they really, really liked the solution and used it on their own website and with their own clients. So they resell accessiBe. They want to be a part of that. When you see things like that, it's incredible. It's so powerful.
I totally get it, because that's what excited me 12 years ago. The two-way conversation that allowed you to make a difference in the world, one piece of code at a time or one piece of content at a time. So that is so cool to hear. Yeah. So your clients are telling you that, legislation came in, you're building websites for people, and you obviously were solving a problem. So when was accessiBe? So that was the inspiration, is that you were listening to your marketplace. And when did accessiBe become accessiBe? Like, you had the agency, you are listening to your customers and going, I think there's an opportunity to solve this problem. So when did that happen?
So we started the development back in 2016. It was almost 2 years of strict development with people with disabilities all along the way. In the beginning of 2018, we've released the first version, and the regulation was just in Israel back then. We didn't have something globally. So we released the first version in Israel in 2018, and it was called Nagishli back then, which is accessible to me in Hebrew. It's not even accessiBe. accessiBe is some kind of a translation of Nagishli with some wordplay.
Yep.
So all throughout 2018, we've worked just in Israel, and we saw the demand that the market had for something like this, and the demand for people with that people with disabilities, had for being able to go online. So that's like the beginning of the beginning. That was the first year, the first clients, starting to run a lot of processes and improving the AI, feeding it data of real live websites, not just artificial data through development, but actual websites, get actual feedback from a lot of people. It was public, right? So throughout the development, it was from internal testers and internal employees and people that we've worked with, a couple of dozen, several dozens of people, but not the public. When it went live, it became something that is used on thousands of websites by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, every single month. So we started to get feedback from the ground. We started to change, improve on things from actual feedback. And then by the end of 2018, the DOJ, the Department of Justice in the US, released some kind of an affirmation that websites should be accessible according to the ADA. And that's essentially when we started testing the grounds in the US to see if there really is an opportunity. And we found that, yes, there is absolutely a major opportunity. And that's when accessiBe came to be accessiBe. That's when we changed the name from Nagishli to accessiBe, when we changed the language from Hebrew to English, when we had Hebrew buttons on our website. Up until I think October 2019, like a year ago, we still had like Hebrew buttons that we forgot in some pages. So, we got emails every couple of days or every couple of weeks. We got an email. My bar mitzvah was 20 years ago. I don't know what that button means with a screen button and stuff like that. It was really funny. But yeah, that's like the beginning of accessiBe. And today we're a year and a half, as accessiBe. Almost 2 years if you consider the testing phase that we've ran. In February we'll have like actual 2 years.
So what were some of the big challenges that you struck along the way? So obviously you get people telling you that a button is not in English, it's in Hebrew.
Tiny.
Yeah, that's tiny, I know. So what were a few of the big challenges as you grew the company?
Wow, there were so many. So we've started the company completely bootstrapped. We've invested everything from our own packets, the entire development process over a year and a half of strict development, and then a year plus something in the market, completely bootstrapped. So we were 3 founders, right? And we sold all other businesses that we had. My agency, I sold it. I had another startup that I sold. I had a startup that failed, but tried to scrape whatever I can. And my partners also, they had a marketing agency that they sold. They had a bar that they sold. We sold just everything so we can fund accessiBe for like 3 and something years. We got to a position when we loaned money to each other. We took loans from the bank and then loaned it to each other so we can get by. And that was tough. That was really tough. But we really wanted to do that on our own and not raise funds in the beginning, because then you lose a big chunk of your company, and that's ours. That's our baby. I mean, we can't give it away. We can when you're much bigger and the chunks that you need to give are much smaller, and you don't lose half your company or something like that. 10% of it, 20% of the company. So that was a major challenge, but that challenge drove tons of other challenges. We couldn't hire, at the beginning at least, the best people in Israel, at least a lot of them. So we had to hire just a small number of people. Instead of having a company of 20 or 30 people in the beginning, we had to have 5 people company or 7 people company. That each employee is amazing, but we needed 30 amazing people, not just 5 or 7 amazing people. So we ended up having people who aren't, experts in something, but have to do that something anyway, expert or not expert, because you have to go by, and we have to improve, and you have to become bigger, and you have to become better, and you have to, listen to feedback from the ground, and you have to deploy changes. So it was really tough, but now I can say that I'm a marketeer, a salesperson, a back-end engineer, a front-end engineer, UI designer. I am everything, and each of us is everything. My partner, Dekel, for example, is the COO, CFO, chief legal officer, at least back then, right? So we had to just, and my other partner, Gal, is chief sales, chief marketing, strategy, everything. You just do everything. But you have to hire people that can grow with you and with the company, because when you're starting something and you want to make it really big and really impactful in not 20 years, in 2 years, you have to have people who are versatile. Even if they're not experts in something right now or in a day, if they do that and they go and read online and put their minds into it, they can do that. They can do anything. So when you have people like that, it's much, much easier. That's, I think, the only way to really succeed at the beginning if you're not hugely funded. So that was the major challenges. Find people like that, getting by with not a lot of resources. We've had a lot of instances when we're really scared for the survival of the company. Even though we grew, we didn't take any salary for years. I took my first salary in the beginning of 2020, in January and February 2020. My first salary after we got funded, 12 million funded. We've waited until we have 12 million to take salaries. But now things are blowing up because of all the infrastructure work that we've laid. So things are just blowing up. When I'm trying to analyze, backward, everything that we've done, I think that we've went in a really, really good route. I don't see us doing that any other way.
So what you just told me leads to the next question, which is, you've self-funded it, you've bootstrapped, you've borrowed money between each other, you've done what it takes personally. So what was the defining moment that said, okay, we need to go and get some external funds now? So what was that defining moment, and when did that happen?
So we were in a position when we already have tens of thousands of clients. I think we had like 15,000 at the beginning of the year when we went on the funding round. We had like 15,000. We already were the market leader in the US, the accessibility market leader, and we had an opportunity to blow up. We had an opportunity to really quickly and really efficiently become the accessibility provider. But to do that, you can't keep on, scrapping by. You have to strategize every move, and you have to get out of survival mode and, switch to growth mode. And you can't do that if you don't raise funds. And you can't do that also if you raise 2 million or 3 million or 5 million. You have to raise a lot. If you are to strategize, if you are to work with an actual plan And if you are, to also be able to modify that plan as things go. That was the reason why we went on a funding round. We wanted to do as much as we can without that on our own, but there becomes a time when that's a part of your strategy. You have to have that as part of your strategy if you are to go to the next phase, if you are to go to the next step. And that was the time.
So in terms of how you went about raising money, in other words, going to market to raise capital. So how did you go about raising capital? What were some of the major steps in that process? Can you take us through that?
Yeah. So I think that, so there are sometimes you see companies and entrepreneurs and investors, they tell you, raise when you can, not necessarily when you need.
Yes.
Right? I don't feel like that. I personally, and for my companies, I don't feel that that's the right way to go. I think raise what you need when you need it for a reason. Like, build a plan, know where you want to go, where you want to be in a year, in 2 years. Don't think too far ahead. 2 years is plenty, for a young startup. But do that plan, analyze the risks, analyze competition, analyze everything that there is to analyze, and think of the real actual number that you're going to put to work if you are also to be efficient. I mean, there are, methods, right? There is the method of burn as much as possible to grow as much as possible, and there is the other, like, doctrine, the capital efficient. I'm more of a capital efficient guy. Even though we are growing super quickly, I also think that it's very healthy as a business to not just burn everything that you have in order to grow quickly and then raise them again and run through different funding rounds. So the process is, first and foremost, understand that this is what you really need in order to grow, but really for real, not just because that's what startups usually do. The business is not raising money. Startups is not in the business of raising money. Startups are in the business of building businesses, not raising money. And sometimes it's hard to remember that. So that's first step, right? That's first step. Understand that that's what you really, really, really need according to your very in-depth plan. When you have that, then everything becomes much easier because you have reasons for everything, you have answers for everything. You understand your business and your market and your competition and everything all throughout. And when you speak with investors and you know everything that there is to know, the goods and the bads, it just becomes much easier because you do that for a reason. You don't do that because you can. You don't do that because other people do that. You do that because that's what the business needs. And, venture funds, PEs, investors, they're smart. They can analyze a business. They can see what you see, right? So if you're aligned, and that's what happened with us, it becomes much easier.
And that raises the next question, which you just mentioned then, which your investors are smart. They see what you need. And how often do you share your, I suppose, status? In other words, provide reporting to your investors. Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Do you sit down or send out a report? So you make sure that you're matching, the investors are seeing what you need, and you got this matching of values, and you're reporting to make sure that you're moving together at the same time. So how often do you report to your investors to make sure that you're working together?
So in terms of what we have to, in double quotes, according to the contract, it's once a quarter or something, once a month, and then once a quarter, depending on
Mm-hmm.
the type of reporting. But we usually meet at least twice a week
Mm-hmm.
to talk about everything. So I have a weekly meeting with the partner at K1, our investors,
Yep.
for analyzing the business and talking through, the things that we've gone through the last week and updates and things like that, and to bounce ideas. And we also have a financial meeting every single week to make sure that we're tracking the right things, that we don't have surprises along the way. Those things, those reportings, often, you often look at it and you think that it's something that can bother, right? Or be a waste of time. But when you work with smart people, it's never a waste of time, because you gain tons of insights from those meetings,
Yep.
from data. And they think that, so it's more than reporting. It's not just reporting. It's reporting for the sake of improving. It's not just, here are the numbers. You put your money. Now you need to know, what we've done with it, or how much we still have. It's not just that. It's gaining insight, and that also depends on the investor. Not all investors are like that.
Mm-hmm.
We are fortunate to have investors that you gain insights from almost every single conversation that you have with them. It doesn't matter who you're speaking with in K1. You gain insights from that conversation. So it's a bit more than just reporting,
Yeah, so the reporting is learning from each other, them contributing to the journey. The other thing I'm detecting too is that there's a continual building of trust and transparency.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is?
Oh, it's super important. I mean, especially if that's not your only, but the first big investor. We've went with K1 specifically because of several reasons, but one of the reasons is because they're big. They're like a $3 billion fund. They can help us along the way. It's not like we raise a small seed or a small Series A with them, and then Series
Mm-hmm.
B or Series C or Series D. We'll have to go and look for others. Even though we might do that for strategic reasons, we don't have to. We have really amazing, investors to work with as of today, and you want to build a relationship for the long term, because we're here for the next 15 years. We aren't gonna, leave in 2 years or 3 years or even 5 years. We're here for the long term, and we're gonna work together for a long time. And we want to be able to make strategic decisions that are based on what the company needs and not anybody else. The 100% of the decisions must be aligned as much as possible. Sometimes you have, different opinions, but the idea is, even when you have that, you find the middle ground, not in terms of compromising, but in terms of trying to convince the other end on what you think, and hearing their counters and their arguments, and then come up with a plan that just, it's not a compromise. It's a plan that has the minds of all sides,
Mm-hmm.
and the insights of all sides. And we've done that a lot of times. We had many times that we thought, that's what we need to do, 100%. Let's just roll with it. Let's just move forward and rush through this plan. And then we had some feedback from K1 or other investors or advisors, and we had to break the plan, add their insights, rebuild it, and make it much better. And you have to do that with full transparency, that each and every one that contributes to that plan, the only thing that they have in mind is the success of accessiBe, and not their success or their reasons behind the scenes or anything like that. It's just the success of accessiBe, and it takes some time, but you eventually get there when all the conversations and all the interactions, take you through this path. you see in every single conversation, in every single decision, in every single argument, you see that. You see the success of accessiBe. You see often things that you may think, well, it's not the best thing for K1. Why did they suggest that? Or it's not the best thing for investor X, from before, or advisor X from before, even though they suggest that. And then you understand their mind, their point of view, how they look at things, and you understand that you are completely together, completely. And then then you're in a really good situation. You're in a really good place to build something for the next 15 years.
So what you've just said is essentially it's a real synergy and collaboration between all the partners, the creators, you guys, accessiBe, and the investors, and all the intelligence and consciousness they bring to the table. And you're just trying to distill that into the best solution possible to make accessiBe, to make that difference in the world, to provide access to the 25% of people that struggle to access the internet or read a website or buy something online. Now, there must be a real tension too, because you've got global competitors, I'm sure. And because essentially, as people watch what you're doing, they're going, we can copy what you're doing. And this goes on all the time. So it turns into a bit of an arms race, doesn't it? So from my observation, I've been involved with startups, been on the board of them, invested in them, sweat for equity deals as well with them. And essentially in software as a service type companies, not dissimilar to yours. But there's two components to see that's really important. Number one is a technology arms race. In other words, you've got to have a team of really smart developers building the best tool possible. Number two, there's a marketing arms race. You've got to get out to the world and tell your story before your competitors tell a better story. Tell me about that and how you see that.
Yeah. So in terms of competition, that's correct. There is an arm race towards, making, a software that can just solve accessibility. We are there for 3 years now, or 2 years now that our software does it. What we're seeing today is mostly the second part, that telling the story, because we still don't have competition in technology. We're still the only ones that can do that fully automatically. You just install our single line of code. That's it. It just makes your site accessible. And we're still the only ones that can do that automatically. But we're seeing so many other, services, hybrid type solutions, one that provide only like an accessibility interface that solves like 10 or 20 maximum % of compliance requirements and things like that. But that's really funny. They take a snapshot of our site and our marketing and our messages, and they just copy it. It's really crazy to see that. You see our headline today in like 4 different websites. Literally, our headline in 4 different websites. Not even with a variation. It's just in the 4 different websites. Look. So you have that, but we are living that story. We felt and feel that from the ground. You can't replicate our moves. You can replicate the title that we come up with. You can replicate, the design that we come up with. You can replicate like the productions, right? But you can't replicate everything that we've went through. You can't replicate what we felt from the ground. You can't replicate the feedback that we got from people. You can't replicate that. And those are the things that drove that story. Those are the things that drove that design. Those are the things that drove that messaging. So you can replicate the end message, but the message changes all the time. And if you don't find your own thing, your own experience, and you just copy that, you may do fine, but you will never become the leader. Never. And So I'm looking at that and I'm flattered, because I see like four of my competitors just copying pasting out my title. It's crazy. Um, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried because we live that. We literally live that, and the messaging is changing all the time. And we're just about to change, just about in like a few weeks, we're about to upload a new website with different messaging and and a lot of different things. And like two of the competitors just released their copied messaging like in the last uh, month, 1 month. So it's like, I mean, by the time we change that, you take that, So I'm not worried about that. I'm also not worried in terms of, the technology arm race, because I really, really, really want to have competition in technology, because it will, one, drive us to be better, and two, it will drive the entire industry. By the end of the day, the industry, or the potential, the market is insanely huge. If we take just the United States, we have 31 million businesses that manage 350 million websites, and all of them must be accessible. You have room for 30 companies that all of them are huge. Obviously, you won't have 30 companies. You will eventually have 3, 4, and one big leader, maybe 2 big leaders, and an additional 3 that are smaller. But the more companies that you have that can really solve what you do, the more companies that can market, and the more companies that can raise awareness, and the more companies that put the problem out there and make people see that they also need to become accessible. So it just opens the market. As long as it's a really big market, it's not a problem, quite the opposite. So I'm not worried about that. But I do want to see competitors finding their own, their own stories with their own experiences.
So it's interesting to hear that, excuse me, that your biggest challenge is not the technology arms race, but the marketing arms race to win hearts and minds. So I'd like to get you to tell us a little bit about how easy it is to implement, because I got one of my team to implement accessiBe on our site. Now, I didn't do it, but one of my team did, and it looked really easy. So can you tell us how easy it is to implement accessiBe and make sure that people with disabilities can start using people's websites?
Yeah, it's really easy. The implementation is just a single line of code that you copy from our site and you paste it in your site. If you have WordPress or Joomla or one of the most popular CMSs, big commerce even, then we have also plugins. You just install it for you. The plugin will install the installation code for you, so you don't even need to handle templates and things like that. But the installation is just like you install Google Analytics or Facebook Pixel or online chat solutions or things like that. You can also use Google Tag Manager to install accessiBe. You just paste the code there and publish. So it's really easy. In terms of what you need to do in order to ensure that people with disabilities can use your website, nothing. accessiBe just does that for you. So that's the whole point of accessiBe. We know how important accessibility is. It's one of the most pressing topics, and it's not. And I'll tell you what, how I look at it is a bit different than most people. It's not just reaching equal access and providing opportunities for people with disabilities. It's not just that as a reason. It's a much more selfish reason. Society's selfishness in double quotes. Mm-hmm. When 20% of the population isn't able to get the resources online that I, for example, got, and I'm self-taught, everything that I know I've learned online on my own. When 20%, a huge number, more than 1 billion people, aren't able to access that information, they can't go through the same route that I did and many other entrepreneurs and many other people. And when you are excluding that big number, I mean, not by anybody's fault, right? It's not like somebody is excluding anybody purposefully. But when that happens, and you have amongst those billion plus people, you have super bright minds, you know, that are driven as you and I, as smart as you and I, some much, much more, some less, fine, like, you know, in every society, in every group. But when you have such a big number of people who are super driven, who are super smart, but can contribute to society as much as you can because they don't have, you know, access to resources, then society itself is losing a lot, because amongst those people, there can easily be the people who can build the next big innovation, the next big startup, the cure for something, I don't know, COVID, whatever. And by not having them, we all lose. And I'll give you an example. Among the people that we're working with, there are a lot of blind people. Some of them are, you see that, and your perception changes completely. Blind programmers that write code, wow. You know, blind typing, they don't see the keyboard, so the blind typing.
Yep.
The screen reader reads out the code back to them that they just wrote on 300% speed, like the speed of speaking, so multiplied by 300%, like 3 times. That's the speed that they have to understand what they wrote, find out if they had bugs or typos or things like that, while listening to music. And you see complete programs that they write like that. You see entrepreneurs that built amazing products. I have one guy, super young, 20-something guy that works with me here in Israel. He's like that. He's an entrepreneur. He built some kind of a laptop braille device hybrid. You know, it's like a laptop hardware with braille output that, you know, takes out like those tiny spikes, the tiny dots that comprise the braille language. And you put it, as a blind person, it's called L-Braille. You put it in the bag, and then it becomes your mobile device. There isn't a screen. They don't need a screen. They don't see it anyway. They just use the screen reader, right? And you see people like that, and you understand, even with all the challenges, they have reached that level, which is much higher than mine. And if we had a lot of people that we could have given access to the resources that we had, that I had, again, more than 1 billion people, probably the world would have looked differently. And that's what I want to achieve. I want to make sure that all of them have access to all those resources for selfish reasons, just to help society grow, for completely selfish reasons, to help the world itself, not them. That's how I look at it. And that's what you said. The world changes you, right? In the beginning, the world changes you. I had no idea. I never even, you know, before I entered the web accessibility space, I never even imagined that a blind person can use a computer. It's unimaginable. How is it even possible? There's a screen, there's a mouse, there's a keyboard. You can't see them. It's not even possible, right? But then you get inside and you see how different reality is from your perception, and how things can really dramatically change if you are able to give them just access to those resources, because they're driven enough. They can just find their own way once you just give them the opportunity to get the resources, to read blogs, you know, and tutorials online that weren't accessible before, but now are accessible. You know, to just have those resources. That's my point of view.
I can hear and I can feel your passion, and I'd summed up this way after listening to you, in that you're unlocking the genius of 1 billion people that normally wouldn't have had the resources or access to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do.
Great. Well, I am so glad to have had this conversation with you because you're on a mission, and the mission is to unlock the genius of 1 billion people that previously didn't have the means and resources to do it. And I look forward to hearing more about the journey, Shir. And it's been such a joy to hear your passion just shining through. And thank you for your time. How can people find you, and how can they find accessiBe?
accessiBe.com. It's like accessible, but without the L.com.
Okay, spell it out for me.
accessibe.com.
Right. Thank you very much, Shir, for sharing your passion, and I look forward to seeing you continuing to change the world and giving people access to helping them change the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It's great.